Hello, my name is Diallo Stevens and I work with Century 21 Best in Queens County, New York. Today I wanted to tell you a little bit about short sales. Okay, a lot of people ask me about short sales. Usually if they're a prospective buyer who's looking to pick up a property and get a really good deal on it. Or if they're a seller, a homeowner who may be at risk of foreclosure. Then they hear about short sales, they don't really know what they're all about, so they ask. So the purpose of this video is to give you a sense as to an overview as to what short sales are and situations where they may or may not make sense. Okay, so let's say that you're a homeowner and for whatever reason you purchased a property maybe last year or a few years ago, or maybe 50 years ago, but you refinanced it. So you owe this much for the property. But over the past few years, the property values in general have come down, okay? So let's say that you owe this, but now the property is worth this. And for whatever reason, you can't afford to pay the mortgage anymore, and you want to sell this house. Well, what do? Okay? Well, it depends on your circumstances. If you've got the difference in money available to you, maybe in brokerage accounts or bank accounts, you pay the difference. You sell the property for what it's worth, and whatever the deal is short, you would make up from your own pocket, from your own assets. That's the normal process. If, however, you have a hardship, you can't afford the mortgage anymore, and you don't have the ability to make up the difference, you might be a candidate to sell the property short. In other words, sell it as a short sale. Okay? So in that scenario, you owe this on the property, it's now worth this. I'm just going to make up some numbers. Let's say that you owe $500,000 for the property. But now it's worth $400,000. You don't have any real assets to speak of. You can prove that you can't afford to pay the mortgage anymore. Maybe because the interest rate has turned into an adjustable rate mortgage, or you lost a job, or whatever the situation might be. If you have a legitimate hardship, we may be able to make a case to your existing lender to try to get them to reduce what's owed to them and allow you to sell it for market value. So the way it works basically is you've got to have a good reason for it, usually a hardship, and you ultimately are going to have somebody try to negotiate with the lender. Okay? The lender will be advised that you need to sell the property, you need to sell it short. Short meaning that you are short in funds versus what you owe because the property is worth less. So you got to have a buyer, right? You submit a contract and you fill out a whole bunch of papers. It's called a short sale package, which you'll get from the lender. And it'll include financial disclosures, and you've got to basically show your financial strength. Because obviously, if you have the ability to pay back the debt, the bank is going to expect you to pay back the debt. Okay? But the contract and all these papers get sent to the lender, they will evaluate it and assign what's called a negotiator to basically negotiate the transaction. Now, generally speaking, I would recommend that you not try to negotiate it yourself. Get somebody else who's more familiar with it. Maybe a broker who's got some experience with this, or in our marketplace, more often, an attorney that has experience negotiating short sales. The lender is going to do their due diligence. If the property is worth $400 in this scenario, and they can prove that doing their own homework, and everything else makes sense, chances are they're going to approve the short sale rather than to foreclose the property. There's never a guarantee, it's up to them. Now, if they approve the short sale, then you sell the property for the $400,000 that you got from a buyer, okay? And they essentially forgive the difference. Now, your credit will be impacted because chances are you will not have been making your payments, right? So you have late payments. And you under most circumstances, you'll have to pay taxes on the amount that you saved. But all your costs, most notably your closing costs, the cost of sale, will come out of the $400,000 that ultimately gets approved. So you really aren't paying anything, and you're getting rid of the problem, and you're avoiding a foreclosure. And perhaps more importantly, you're avoiding a foreclosure with a deficiency judgment. Because if your property goes to foreclosure and it gets sold off for what you owe, for less than you owe in your closing costs, technically you still owe the difference to the lender. Not to mention the closing costs, not to mention penalties, accrued interest, etc. And the lender can go and get a deficiency judgment against you, which is a money judgment which will sit in your credit report, and ultimately you're responsible for paying that. So if you're in a situation like this and a short sale applies, it can be, in some cases, your only real way out of the situation. Now, let's look at it from a buyer's perspective. Buyer wants to buy your property, but they don't want to pay $500,000 or $500,000 plus. It's not worth it to them, okay? If it's a short sale and it's explained properly to them, they will go through the process with you. Just understand, buyers, that short sales are not guaranteed to be approved, and sometimes they take a long time for the bank to go through its process. Every bank is different, and very often different negotiators, are more efficient than others. So it's not uncommon for it to take 7, 8 months or more. If you're lucky, maybe it closes in 2 to 3 or 4 months. Also, buyers, understand that you're not going to steal the property, because the bank is going to either have the property appraised themselves or have a BPO done, which stands for broker price opinion, where they hire a broker who's not related to the transaction, has no connection to the transaction, to evaluate the property and give their estimate of value. So if the property is really worth $400, but you think you're going to pick it up for $300, chances are the bank is not going to approve that transaction. Okay? But at the end of the day, it can be a good opportunity for you to buy a property that otherwise you might not have been able to get, buy it in a non-competitive fashion. In other words, not at an auction where you've got a bid and there's no telling what other people are going to bid for the property. And if it closes, you basically get a good deal, a reasonable deal for the property. But understand that it will take some time. From your perspective, it is mostly like a normal transaction. Okay? So I would tell you, short sales are not for the faint of heart. Okay? If you're a buyer and you need to get into something very quickly, or you need a sure deal to know that that the deal is actually going to close and you're going to become the owner, you probably are better off looking at a normal transaction, which is not a short sale. But if you're an investor or you have time, you can be a first-time buyer, but you have some time and you find something that you really like and it needs to be done as a short sale, it can be an excellent way for you to get a reasonable deal, an excellent way for the seller to get out of the situation, which otherwise could potentially be a nightmare for their financial future. And it's important that when you try to do a short sale that you have the right people involved. Make sure that your broker knows what they're doing. They're familiar with short sales. They have a history with them. And make sure that your lender understands that it's a short sale, a lender for the purchaser. And of course, if you're in an area where attorneys are used, absolutely make sure that you've got an attorney with some experience and knowledge in terms of negotiating or managing real estate transactions, which are short sales. Okay? Feel free to contact my office, me directly, if you have any questions. Happy to help. Hopefully this video has given you useful information, and thank you very much for your time. Again, Diallo Stevens, Century 21 Best. We're located in New York City, Queens County. Thank you.